Hello, I'm Ron Squire and welcome to highlights of the 2026 Formula SimRacing World Championship. Round 2 is the Japanese Grand Prix. The famous Suzuka circuit is well known for being the only figure-eight track on the calendar and features a wide variety of corners, negotiating the tricky S-curves, the fast-sweeping Dunlop and Degner curves, the tie hairpin, difficult spoon curve, and the adrenaline-inducing 130R curve. This track demands a perfect setup for the teams and will ensure to put the driver's skill level to the test over 53 laps. The race took place on Easter weekend. As a result, many drivers reported absent due to personal commitments, including River Machete, Giuseppe Saracino, Zolk Soeks, Ritz Krop and Ruben van den Hudding. However, the grid had two new team entries for this round: Mission 19 Supernova GP, driven by Tommaso Sendici and Jansen Bintz, and 7 Arrows Engineering, which the sole car is driven by former Optimal driver Saba Elex. ALMMV lock out the front row with Jan Grankvist taking his first pole position of the season ahead of championship leader Alex Lahou and sister teammate Luc Mounier in third. Janis Braxok improved from Australia to land fourth, whilst the world champion Mark Suter can again only muster fifth. Peter Burlak is only getting to grips with the car in sixth ahead of Lucas Murdo in seventh. Giuseppe Canzonieri is the Soul Valley Esports driver in 8th ahead of the Soul Squire Nation Esports car driven by Christian Pascal in 9th, whilst George Zalgianis rounds out the top 10. Will Snowden just misses out by 2/10, qualifying in front of both sister teammates Saba Elex and actual teammate Aman Suisi, who made his debut at this very race over 5 months ago. Invictus line up 14th and 15th with Matt Toussaint and Nando Maza, whilst Raras Toma makes his World Championship debut at the back after failing to set a time. To the race start, it was a clean getaway from Grankvist whilst Lahou tries to hold off Mounier. Braxok also does the same, fending off Shooter whilst everyone makes it through the first couple of corners safely. But disaster will unfurl after the S-curve as Toussaint gets nudged by Bintz and Sopanen gets squeezed by both Bintz and Sendici, sending the Finn flying into the air. With all three cars suffering from some degree of damage, Bintz and Toussaint was able to complete the lap, but sadly for Sopanen, he pulls in to retire. At the end of the opening lap, Grankvist leads from Lahou, Mounier, Braxok, Shooter, Murno, Burlak, Pascal, Canzonieri and Snowden. Just like Ruben van den Hudding in Australia, Giuseppe Canzonieri loses the back end whilst turning in for the first corner after failing to close his DRS in time, sending the Italian off and slamming into the barrier, forcing retirement number 2 of the Grand Prix on lap 3. Another retirement would occur on lap 5 as Christian Pascal loses grip after the first Degner and loses the back end figuratively and literally, a bad end to the day for both the Italian and the Welsh team. On the same lap, Sendici loses his front wing, the Italian struggling back to the pits for repairs. It would be another retirement as Saba Elex calls it a day after losing his front wing at the Degners, pulling into the pits to retire on lap 6 as the attrition rate keeps on going higher and higher. Lap 7 brings disaster for Jan Grankvist as the Finn loses control of the car at Dunlop Curve, causing the ALMMV driver to take to the gravel, gifting the lead to Lahou as Grankvist rejoins in 4th behind Braxok. Lahou's lead would not last long. On lap 9, Mounier makes a nail-biting overtake on his sister teammate at turn 1, and MV Conquest driver leads the World Championship race for the very first time. So on lap 10, Mounier leads ahead of the World Championship leader whilst Janis Braxok holds on to 3rd from Grankvist, who's still reeling from his excursion a few laps ago. Mark Shooter seemingly helpless in 5th whilst Lucas Murno is breathing down his neck. Peter Burlak is having a consistent race in 7th. George Zalgianis is having his best performance so far this season in 8th, whilst both 7 Arrows drivers round out the top 10, Snowden leading from Suisi. The good performance will not last long for Zalgianis. Like with Pascal and Elex, the Greek loses the back end at the Degners, slamming backwards into the barrier, losing his rear wing in the process. While that did not end his afternoon, getting rear-ended by Jansen Bintz at 130R did. The Greeks' bad time continues as both retire with substantial damage. Also on the same lap, Raras Toma also goes off at the Degners, losing his front wing as well, the remaining out as 13 cars remain. It would get worse for ground effect as Lucas Murno takes 5th from the world champion on lap 13. Suter can only watch as the Brazilian pulls away. The first stops of the race begins on the same lap with both Toussaint and Sendici nearly coming to blows in the pits. No contact was made despite the heart-to-the-mouth moment. Toussaint and Sendici rejoining the back of the field behind Pituglia. Mounier's lead would end on lap 15 as Lahou regains a top spot through 130R as the sister teammates essentially swap places. Suisi was the next one to pit on lap 17. The Tunisian loses no positions due to how spread the field is as the 7 Arrows rejoins in 10th on the mediums. Lap 18 and both Grankvist and Murno go off on their own at Spoon at the same time. While the Finn was able to rejoin quickly, the Brazilian went into the barrier, surprisingly with minimum damage. The Optimal hosting driver loses 5th back to Sluter as he rejoins behind Burlak, almost collecting the Croatian. On the same lap, Sedici's race doesn't get any better. The Italian loses the back end whilst going through the S-curves, spinning off and briefly nudging the tyre wall, thankfully with no damage. But his race would just end a couple of laps later. The Italian loses the back end whilst going halfway through the first curve and nudges the barrier again with little damage, but Adebisi calls his race here and there. Lap 23 and the world champion along with Grandfist and Murdo pit at the same time. Grandfist rejoins in 5th, just a couple of seconds ahead of Will Snowden. Schluter did not get his strategy right as the German rejoins in 7th, and Murdo's stop sees the Brazilian rejoin behind Marza in 9th. Schluter would claim 6th from Snowden after a dead overtaking the lead up to 130R on the next lap. 11 cars remain in the race as Leila Petriglia spins out like so many others before at the Degners, slamming the Elk International into the barriers, ending the race for the Irish outfit on lap 24. At halfway distance, the leading trio of Alex Lahou, Loic Mounier and Janis Braxok were one of the closest battles of the race, all three within 1 second of each other, but the vital mistake by Mounier at the Casio Triangle costs the Frenchman his 2nd place in the process. Jan Krankwist holds on to 4th from sister teammate Peter Burlak in 5th, the world champion is not having a good race in 6th, Lucas Murdo holds himself together in 7th, whilst both 7 Arrows and Invictus drivers round out the rest of the field, both Snowden and Suisi in front of Mazda in the top 10. At the front, Lahou for the last couple of laps attempts to defend off as much as he can from Janis Braxok. The Ottomali driver holds on to the Frenchman's tail. Further back, Mark Schluter makes a decent overtake on Peter Burlak in the lead up to 130R, only for the Croatian to pit shortly afterwards. At the same time, Mounier also pits in from 3rd. The MV Conquest duo rejoined in 6th and 7th respectively. Lap 32 and Lucas Murdo becomes the 10th retirement of the race. Like with so many others, the Brazilian loses it at the Degners, slamming his back end into the barrier. The autumnal hosting driver attempts to make it back to the pits, but with no downforce, the Brazilian loses the back end again in the lead up to Spoon, smashing into the barrier again and loses the front wing as well as suspension problems beyond repair, ending his race on the spot. Lap 33 and Lahou makes his only stop of the race as Braxok takes the lead. The ALMMV driver rejoins in 4th behind Schluter and just in front of Mounier. Braxok's lead would not last long as on the next lap, the Hungarian pits give the lead to Schluter. Braxok would rejoin in 4th behind Mounier, but further back the Grandfist race gets from bad to worse. The Finn losing control once again at Spoon and nudges the barrier, losing his front wing in the process. The Finn was able to make it back for repairs, with Grandfist rejoining in 7th, just edged by Marza. Lap 37 and Lahou's pace seems to falter a little bit as sister teammate Luc Mounier overtakes the ALMMV driver down the main straight for 2nd, taking a hit to Lahou's pursuit of Schluter. This time it's Mounier challenging Schluter for the lead of the race on lap 39 as the Frenchman for the MV Conquest makes a move on the German at the first corner, but both men managed to avoid a major collision with each other and kept each other at close quarters, with Lahou breathing down the top two's necks. As Mounier attempts to take the lead from Schluter, the German dives into the pits for most likely his final stop. Mounier takes the lead but only briefly as Lahou takes the lead from his sister teammate almost immediately. The world champion rejoins in 5th just behind Burlak. Schluter would overtake the Croatian at 130R on the next lap. As we approach the last 10 laps, only 10 cars remain in the race. Lahou is back in front of the pack after leading from Mounier and Braxok, all the top 3 within 1 second of each other once again. Schluter pulls away from Burlak in 4th, Jan Grandfist's race has become pear-shaped at this point in 6th, whilst both 7 Arrows and Invictus complete the rest of the field as they intermix with each other. With Grandfist down in 6th, Lahou's lead seems to be more at stake with Mounier looking for any avenue past the championship leader, but must be wary of Braxok behind as well. As the race draws to a close, the top 3 does not show any signs of relenting. Lahou still leads from Mounier, who has Braxok in tow. However, any mistake at this stage would be severe. On lap 47, it seemed Lahou made a lapse in judgment while exiting 130R, giving Mounier a chance, but a chance is all the MV Conquest driver can get as Lahou regains composure. Lap 50 and Braxok forces his way past Mounier for 2nd at Spoon, but his position change won't last long as Mounier regains 2nd at the Casio Triangle on the same lap. No matter what Mounier and Braxok can do, the top 3 remain in close quarters of each other all the way to the finish line. Taking win number 2 of 2026, Alex Lahou doesn't make the victory particularly easy, but celebrates quite significantly. Loic Mounier, after an upside down race, does extremely well to get 2nd, whilst Janis Braxok continues to improve with 3rd. Mark Schluter's tail defence seems to become weaker and weaker as the German finishes nearly 6 seconds behind in 4th. Peter Burlak's season remains consistent with 5th. Tempers rise as Amin Suisi and Nando Marza almost came to blows with each other on the final lap, but both men managed to cross the line, minus Suisi's front wing. Grandfist sadly crashed out on the final lap at the S curves, but still manages to finish 8th, whilst the 2 remaining Brits, Snowden and Tucson, finished the top 10. With only 9 cars crossing the line, the Japanese Grand Prix had a high rate of attrition. In the drivers' table, Lahou leads by 14 points, ahead of both Schluter and Mounier, who both share 2nd. Frankfurt had a disastrous time at Suzuka, but still manages to muster some points to hold on joint 4th with Jans Braxok, only 2 points ahead of Peter Burlak. Nandor Mazda had a relaxed race with some improvement as the Hungarian leaps up to 7th, whilst Will Snowden takes 8th. Teammate Anman Suisi holds on to 9th, whilst Christian Pascal rounds out the top 10 despite going for an early bath. In the Constructors, it's still the MV affiliated teams in front with ALM MV ahead of MV Conquest by 16 points. Ground Effect did not have a good race in Suzuka, but still holds on to 3rd. 7 Arrows leap up into 4th, 1 point ahead of Otomali. Invictus Motorsports are 2 points behind, while Squire Nation Esports slipped down to 7th. The rest of the table remains with no points taken, as Mission 19 Supernova GP and 7 Arrows Engineering join the fray. The next race is the Bahrain Grand Prix at the Sakhir International Circuit on Sunday the 26th of April. You can watch that race live as it happens right here on our YouTube channel. Qualifying begins at 8:25pm GMT, with the race starting at 8:45pm GMT. In the meantime, you can join in our forums at formula-racing.net, as well as the Discord server for update information and join in on the community. The links are in the description below, and you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and Ron Squire, and join us for the next round of the 2026 Formula Sim Racing World Championship.